as a way of being sexist in both ways. I'm a feminist, men are bad, and that's really being sexist and unfair to males. And as well, males are scared to act and treat females like they would normal other human beings because she's a female, and then I will be seen as sexist. And I think that's a big issue.
I think that's true. I think that we've created a whole lot of scared men. And the thing is that women do want adults at the other end of their relationships as well. And there's a great feminist writer who's written a book about, is your male partner a little boy? And unfortunately, we do have a whole community of men who are basically infantile. And I'm not saying anyone here is like that. I know you're all very mature, gentlemanly Christian gentlemen. But it is the case that in some ways the backfiring of feminism has been twofold. It's been the undermining of women's confidence in many of the aspects that are most dear to them, many of the aspects of their lives that matters most they're ashamed of. For instance, motherhood. Can't admit I want to be a mother. Can't admit that would be something that would give me joy. That was a problem for a while. I don't think it is so much now. And the other side is the repercussions it has had on relationships with males. And one example of that, and a controversial aspect of that, is the case of the problem pregnancy, where freedom of choice is the model. So what's the downside of that? When a woman becomes pregnant in whatever her relationship situation, the male says, it's your decision, see ya. It's your decision, so I'll just leave you to sort it. In other words, the woman who was in this relationship by which she conceived the child is now being told it's all your problem. You get on with it, you sort it, it's your issue. Now that's not a complementary relationship about pregnancy or about problem solving. But whether the man says that out of fear because he wants to be politically correct, or whether it's a great excuse to get out of the relationship and get away from a complexity, that's unfortunately the scenario that's been created. And I don't think that's part of the vision of the new feminism either. Simply to say, whatever you do, it's your choice. It's not my issue. It is your issue. Everybody is connected to somebody else. It doesn't mean that you dominate the woman or you tell her how she has to sort the decisions out, but it does mean you support her or you help her or you talk to her or you refer her. And that's something that I think has gone backwards actually in the last few years, that kind of opportunity to support. Now, of course, the pregnancy is a relationship with the woman's body, unlike that to the man. So I can understand that insight is true. But it doesn't mean the woman doesn't have relationships with anyone else. Yes?
The last one, I sort of, when I listen to what you were saying, I find it all very kind of inspiring, and then I think about where we live and think about the feminists that get really excited because they're making porn and that's a wonderful step forward for women and all that kind of thing that's out there, and the fact that women can now go around and drink and do all the other things that they used to be able to do, but that's a step forward for us. So I suppose I wanted to get some ideas from you when we leave this room. What do we do to, in very small ways, change what's out there?
$6 million question, isn't it? Yeah, it's a very good question. I agree with you that I think a lot of women, and I guess it just goes back to the comment to the young gentleman over there again about selling out. I'm not actually trying to dismiss all the feminist ambitions, but you can see a case of that where women go, I am really showing I have power over men by making porn. That variation of the script. That this is really using my feminine sexuality to make people want me. And that's my power burst. Well, it is a kind of power, that's true. But it's now a kind of slave-slave relationship, isn't it, in a way? And that's seen by some postmodern feminists as a kind of victory. Earlier feminists would have been rolling over thinking this is terrible, but they don't say anything anymore, or they're disinclined to say anything. And that's another case where the voice of true feminism is actually silenced. They don't feel they can say it because they're too overwhelmed by, first of all, the global problem of pornography. How do you stop it? How do you even begin to address that problem? And I think that we go back to the original solitude idea, don't we? We start person by person to start with. I think one of the things that I've bought some little prayer cards for is something that Penny mentioned to you just recently, and that was the group Anima, which is a network of women. What we try to do in that, we try to stay in touch with women and give them encouragement and support. And also to acknowledge the place of men and give them dignity and respect as well. But we're based really on the principles of new feminism. So, but you don't have to join Anima. You can support your own female friends, give yourself encouragement, go to places that you think treat you with dignity. Treat yourself with dignity. Demand it. Don't settle for less, because you're worth more than that. It's a hard call, isn't it? Because quite often you get that terrible insecurity, but if I don't do this now, I'll never get another chance. That panic that we all have at the moment in the 21st century. But I think that women have always been very good at networking. In a way, I think they've been much better networking than men, and I think that's where men have got to try and get their act together. I remember when I started Anima with these young women many years ago, 5 years ago, I got all these people ringing up going, why don't you start something for men? And I said, well, you guys start it yourself. And they go, we don't know how to do it. How do you do this networking business? We don't like talking about that sort of stuff. And I said, well, what men don't like necessarily sitting down and saying, we are coming here to talk for a purpose. But maybe you get together and do something together. You know the old idea in Western culture of building a barn. Blokes would go along and say, we'll build a barn and we'll all come and have a drink and we'll talk. And a lot of networking is going on there that's very constructive. Sometimes it's sport, but I think, or sometimes it's just coming together and sharing a bit of time. But men will not network in quite the same way as women will network, nor will they network in the way that they might as couples or other kinds of configurations. And part of what we try and do in Anima is think, well, how can we give women more encouragement? How can we give them resources to stand up for themselves? How can we make them feel welcome? How can we really explore what their vocation should be? They're all the key areas, all those key things I think are something that individual women can build up in their own way. And I think maybe young women are starting to do that a little bit. They're starting to really put their finger on the issues much more bravely and loudly than, say, my generation. My generation are really quiet. I know because all my friends are in my generation, or some of my friends, and they say, oh, I can't criticise that. And you go, well, why can't you criticise that? Oh, because it's not big then. I was the naughty one at school, so I don't have any problem criticising things. But they don't network very much. They're a bit cautious. Whereas I think your generation have got a bit more fire in your belly. Just don't turn the fire in your belly into just indigestion. Turn it into something constructive. So I think mutual support, starting groups, look after yourselves together. Sometimes do things that are fun together. Because I think women are actually working very hard to keep their head above water, as men are. And we do need to give each other sort of moral support. So that's just some of the things I would suggest. If you want to campaign against something, say something. I'll give you an example of why campaigning can be very effective. There's a very, very funny woman called Julie Gale, who was part of the Fringe Festival, who's a new feminist. She's an interesting, very, very funny lady who impersonates people. And she has started an organisation called Free to Be Kids. She's just a bit of an inspiration because she's a one-woman band. She started off being like that. And she noticed as a mother that going down to her local supermarket and to the petrol station, there was rows and rows and rows of porn that was actually teenage porn. It was underage, illegal pornography on display when you went to pay your money for your petrol. And she thought, this is illegal. It certainly shouldn't be on display. So she wrote to all the CEOs of the BHP, Caltex, and said, do you know that you've got these magazines on display right next to your... And she's a very frank, feisty lady. And she took it right up to them. And several of the companies withdrew those magazines, wrote her letters in abject apology. Several didn't, and one of them was McDonald's Petrol. They said, oh, we don't know about that. Again, that power of globalisation to just ignore an issue. So she used her talents in a way that she thought she could. And I think that's, if you can't do it alone, get someone else to help you do it. Get your voice back. Because I think that's one thing that women have, and I guess is what I meant, now being very defensive about my comment about women selling out, is what I meant is that women once upon a time And even in recent history, let's take Northern Ireland, where the mothers banded together to try and bring about peace. They just did it. They didn't ask anyone's permission. They didn't go down and say to the bishop, "Can we start a peace movement, please?"